I stayed outside a club to make sure two drunk girls got home safely. A few minutes later, a van pulled up for them. This happened late one night when a friend and I were leaving a nightclub. We walked outside at almost the exact same time as two young women who were clearly far more intoxicated than they realized. They could barely walk in a straight line. One of them kept panicking and repeating, "Where's my phone? I've lost my phone," while patting down her pockets and searching through her bag. After several minutes, she finally realized the phone was half wedged into the top she was wearing. They looked very young, probably only recently 18, and neither of them seemed capable of making sensible decisions. They started talking to my friend and me as though we already knew each other. Their speech was slurred. They kept losing track of the conversation, and one of them had to hold on to the other just to remain standing. Eventually, I asked how they were getting home. They said they were going to walk. From what they told me, their house wasn't nearby. They would have needed to walk through several quiet streets in the middle of the night, and they could hardly make it across the pavement outside the club. I told them to order an Uber. They complained that they didn't want to spend the money, but I insisted. When they struggled to unlock their phones and enter the address, I helped them order one. I decided not to book my own ride yet. Leaving them alone in that condition didn't feel right. While we were waiting, I noticed a man standing near the entrance of the club. I couldn't say exactly what made me uncomfortable about him. He wasn't doing anything obviously threatening. He just had a strange intensity in his eyes, and he kept looking between the two women and the club entrance as though he was waiting for something. After watching us for a while, he walked over. He asked whether we wanted to go to an after party. I immediately said no for all of us. He smiled, but there was something wrong with the expression. It looked forced, like he wasn't expecting anyone to refuse him. He ignored my answer and started talking directly to the girls, telling them the party was close and that his Uber was already on its way. Neither girl seemed to understand what was happening. One of them laughed. The other stared down at her phone, trying to remember which car she had ordered. I repeated that we weren't interested. The man didn't leave. He stayed close to us, occasionally looking at the girls and then glancing back toward the road. He barely spoke after that. He just waited. Then a vehicle pulled up. It was a dark people carrier, the kind of van with a large sliding door on the side. There was no obvious taxi sign, and I couldn't see any company markings. It stopped directly in front of us. The man walked over and opened the sliding door. That was when the situation became truly unsettling. He didn't greet the driver. He didn't confirm a name. He didn't ask whether the car was for him. He didn't even look at the driver. He simply opened the door, turned back toward us, and once again told us to come to the after party. The inside of the van was dark. I could see the outline of the driver in the front seat, but the driver never said anything either. No greeting, no question, no indication that this was a normal ride. I refused again, more firmly this time. The man stood beside the open door and stared at us. He waited for an uncomfortably long time, long enough that the silence became impossible to ignore. The club music was muffled behind us, cars passed at the end of the street, and the van remained there with its side door open. He kept looking at the two women as though he expected them to change their minds. For a moment, I wondered whether he was waiting for my friend and me to walk away. But we didn't. Eventually, he seemed to realize that the girls weren't going anywhere with him. Without saying a word to the driver, he slid the door shut. The van immediately drove away. He didn't get inside. He didn't call after it. He didn't complain that his supposed Uber had left without him. He simply watched it disappear, turned around, and calmly walked back toward the entrance of the club. That was the moment I understood that the van had probably never been there to collect him. If it had really been his Uber, why had he opened the side door instead of getting into the car? Why hadn't he spoken to the driver? Why had the driver waited silently while he tried to convince two heavily intoxicated young women to climb inside? And why had the van driven away without its alleged passenger? The girl's actual Uber arrived a few minutes later. I checked the license plate and asked the driver to confirm their names before allowing them to get inside. Even then, I stood there watching until the car had disappeared down the street. My friend and I talked about the encounter afterward, trying to convince ourselves there might have been an innocent explanation, but I still think about the way that man watched those girls. I think about how he appeared only after they walked out of the club. I think about the van arriving at exactly the right moment and the silent driver waiting behind the wheel. I believe the man had seen them inside. He knew how drunk they were, followed them outside, and expected them to be alone. Unfortunately for him, they started talking to us. Fortunately for them, we stayed.